Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to NASCIO Midyear, Day 2. Please welcome your NASCIO President, Dennis Goulet.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the NASCIO Midyear Conference. I hope you enjoyed the sessions yesterday and found creative ways to engage with your colleagues in the Conference Hub. It is useful to access the Hub via the web and mobile app, so make sure if you can that you're set up on both devices. I keep the Hub open during sessions so I can toggle over to answer poll questions easily and visit the virtual hallway between sessions. Thank you to everyone that has donated to the Give Back program benefiting girls in technology. If you weren't able to join the opening session yesterday, you can learn more about this organization and make a donation in the Conference Hub. Collaboration is the theme of the day. A big thank you to our daily content sponsors, Beyond Trust, Esri, and Zendesk. And a special thank you is also in order for the Midyear Platinum sponsors. To introduce our panel this morning is Jim Richburg, CISO for the Platinum sponsor, Fortinet. Welcome, Jim, and thank you, Fortinet, for your support of the Midyear Conference.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Richburg from Fortinet. I'm here representing Fortinet, a leading network security company, as a platinum sponsor at this mid-year conference, supporting NASCIO and state CIOs and showcasing the role of the private sector in supporting the state IT community. Collaborate. That's today's conference theme. And after the year we've been through, I'm not sure that we could be focused on a more important concept than collaboration in today's environment. While we've always known that collaboration is key to success, I think the past year has illustrated just how crucial a flexible, efficient, and collaborative network can be. And that as important as networks of technology are, networking between people is at least as important. At Fortinet, our goal is to provide a security platform that delivers a broad, integrated, and automated protection everywhere you need it, to help secure the information and assets your citizens and employees rely on. Through these capabilities, we empower our partners with intelligent, seamless protection across the expanding attack surface, allowing you to meet the challenging requirements of today's increasingly borderless digital environment efficiently and securely. As the pandemic drove both citizens and employees alike to their homes to live, learn, and work, the need for online collaborative tools that could be accessed from anywhere grew exponentially and virtually overnight. Every CIO and CISO knows that with this kind of expansion, the attack surface and the potential threats also grow, making secure broadband infrastructure even more crucial for resilience and continuity of operation. Over the last year, the value of collaboration between local, state, and federal leaders to provide the expanded services that our citizens and workforce need to keep things running was on full display. Governors proposed record investment in broadband for their citizens who were in need of safe, secure, and reliable access. School systems pivoting to remote learning needed access for their students to ensure that many wouldn't be left behind. And billions of dollars for investment in broadband expansion flowed from the federal government to state and local governments. For 2021, broadband and wireless connectivity ranks number 4 on the NASCIO State CIO Top 10 list of priorities, up from number 9 in 2020. I have a hunch that it might be even closer to the top when CIOs are surveyed for 2022, since demand for broadband expansion continues to grow. I'm sure that will be a topic today's session will explore as we discuss the challenges and potential of the broadband imperative. Depending on the state's governance structure, CIOs have varying levels of involvement in broadband implementation and expansion. And building on this diversity of involvement, in this session, the panelists will discuss the kind of broadband expansion efforts that are underway in their states, how they are currently supporting these efforts, and what broadband expansion may look like in the years to come. I'm pleased to introduce the panel of those that will help us better understand the broadband imperative. Tom Curtin, Program Director for Infrastructure at the National Governors Association, will serve as the moderator. And the panelists are Tony Neal Graves, CIO for the state of Colorado, Amy Tong, Director and State CIO for the state of California, and Tarek Tomes, Commissioner and CIO for the state of Minnesota. Thank you and enjoy the panel.
All right, thanks so much to the Fortinet team and to Dennis and to the whole team at NASCIO. I'm very pleased to be here today. My name is Tom Curtin, Program Director for Infrastructure at the National Governors Association. And I think we're gonna have a really great discussion today. We have three great professionals from three states here to talk with us. And one quick programming note, Scott Adams, Deputy Director for Broadband and Digital Literacy at the California Department of Technology, is sitting in for Amy Tong. So thank you, Scott, for being flexible and joining us today. So, I thought we'd kick things off by just kind of going around and sharing a bit about your office's structure and your role in your state's broadband efforts. So why don't we start with Tony in Colorado?
Thank you, Tom. And I think I'm kind of in a unique position because I stepped into the CIO role last November from the broadband office. So I was executive director of the office prior to becoming a CIO. And our office reports into me, and it serves as a coordinative function across the entire state government. We've got 6 employees, including the executive director, that man that office, and we deal with all the agencies within the state for a coordinated response on broadband. And we also provide a lot of guidance and support to counties and municipalities as they're thinking through their strategies and plans. And we have 2 fundamental grant programs that we utilize for that. One is targeted towards what we describe as being middle mile projects. And this is money that's given to the public side. So it's municipalities, regional councils and governments to install fiber infrastructure into communities and to connect to anchor institutions. And we have a separate grant program that goes to commercial entities and rural electrics to provide last mile service. And so that's the structure of our team today.
Thanks so much, Tony. Derek in Minnesota.
Thank you, Tom. And I think certainly there are a lot of similarities in Minnesota to what Tony described. I think all state CIOs, irrespective of where broadband is housed within state government, certainly has as a part of our mission to do everything that we can to support those offices, to engage with community partners, vendors, to look for innovative ways to build out broadband access. In Minnesota, our office, Minnesota IT Services, we run a network that we refer to as MNet, the Minnesota network that connects all 87 counties in Minnesota. We also have 11 sovereign tribal nations that we provide connectivity options to. We connect over 300 cities, K through 12 education universities, 200 public schools. And that Minnesota network really has and is a broad collaboration between public sector and private sector that really looks to leverage infrastructure investments that exist within the state and make them available to continue to support the proliferation and build out of broadband access. By statute, created in 2013 in Minnesota is the Office of Broadband Development. And the Office of Broadband Development in Minnesota is housed out of our Department of Employment and Economic Development. And we work really closely and partner with our department there on all things broadband. And really their mission is everything from encouragement to fostering, developing, and also a border-to-border grant program. We have broad goals that we set related to not just providing broadband access, but the quality of broadband access and the type of bandwidth that's available. And currently in Minnesota, approximately 92% of households in Minnesota do have access to broadband, and a lot of that work really stems from, as Tony alluded to, in our instance, what we refer to as the border-to-border broadband grant program.
Great. Thank you, Tarek. Scott, a little bit about your office structure in California and what you have been up to there.
Great, Tom, thanks. Well, I should note that I just completed my first month in the position, but I'm happy to step in for CIO and Director Amy Tong. A little bit about our structure. It is similar to what Tony described. We have the Department of Technology, which is really the guardian of public data in California, and has broad responsibility and authority over all aspects of technology in California government. And that includes policy formation, interagency coordination, IT project oversight, information security, technology service delivery, and advocacy. And so we have a broadband and digital literacy office, which I lead, that reports directly to CIO Tong. And what we do is manage the statewide ecosystem of individuals and organizations that are dedicated to closing the digital divide. So we also support the California Broadband Council, which was established in 2010 to promote broadband deployment in unserved and underserved areas, and then broadband adoption throughout the state. And I would note that our Broadband Council consists of 12 members. It's chaired by, right now, by CIO Tong, but also consists of partner state agencies, the Public Utilities Commission, the Department of Education, emergency services, general services, transportation, food and ag, the state library, and then our tribal Senate and Assembly partners. And it also includes the president of the California Emerging Technology Fund.
That's a really great council, made up of a number of state agencies. And, it strikes me that from the CIO seats, you all sit in positions that you're, naturally collaborating with those other agencies on a regular basis. And, curious because, I was looking at NASCIO's 2020 state CIO survey, and about 3/4 of CIOs are part of a larger team delivering broadband affordability, broadband access and affordability. So curious to hear your kind of thoughts on great ways to go about working collaboratively with your state agencies, with fellow agencies on this effort in particular. I guess we can start with Scott. Did you want to start?
Sure. Well, I think mentioning the Broadband Council, given that that's a formal organization that really creates a structure for collaboration amongst state agencies and partners, that's incredibly supportive for us in terms of collaborating on both broadband deployment and broadband adoption aims. It's also critically important for us to collaborate with our government partners from the federal to the local level, and also private sector, nonprofit, other folks in the ecosystem, which is something that we do in the office. I would also say that some additional support and collaborative structure that has occurred as a result of COVID, and the inequities that have been surfaced and highlighted in the persistent digital divide we have in our state, was the governor's development of a broadband executive order that required the development of a broadband action plan to address the lack of equity that I talked about. Because in our state, 83% of Californians have access to broadband, but only 52% of Californians have access to broadband speeds of 100 megabits per second. So that's critical, and only 51% of our rural households are actually, let me rephrase that, 51% of our rural households have no networks that are offering 100 megabits per second, and 28% of our tribal lands are lacking service at those levels. So the council was ordered by the executive order to develop a broadband action plan, which we collaborated on with the members of the Broadband Council and another of other state agencies, private sector partners, et cetera. And that plan really created a roadmap moving forward that focuses on adoption, deployment, digital literacy, funding, mapping, and data, and was further supported and laid out in the governor's May revise, where he set out an objective to invest $7 billion in funding over 3 years, which was a combination of federal and state funding to expand broadband infrastructure, increase affordability, and enhance access to broadband for all Californians. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's excellent. Those are really, really great efforts. It strikes me that the lack, particularly in rural areas, of the speeds necessary to access the full benefits of broadband service, and combining that with digital literacy, you can't gain that knowledge without utilizing the tool to its fullest. And I think that goes in a lot of ways to one of the chief end uses and importance of access to broadband, which is employment and in our economic development sectors. I can't remember the last time anybody filled out a job application on paper, and so gaining that digital literacy is super important. And Tarek, it strikes me too. I know that your broadband office, is housed within the Employment and Economic Development Department, and maybe tell me a little bit about how that plays into the overall strategy for deployment of broadband there in Minnesota.
No, absolutely. And, just commenting on, the last piece just for a second, I do think the partnerships and the collaboration, are really critical and essential. And certainly during the pandemic, it has never been highlighted more how essential both access and digital literacy is. Everything from kids, being at home and needing access just from an education perspective, parents working, remotely, to, what we saw as it related to how to have an opportunity to get vaccinated, and, just the scarcity of vaccine and how digital connectivity really was a driver, and how it very quickly became a huge equity challenge, just from those that had access from multiple devices and can enter these proverbial lotteries multiple times, to those that really were challenging. If you can't hit enter or click go fast enough, literally during those moments you just really didn't have an opportunity. I think for us, having our Office of Broadband Development housed in the Department of Economic Development is really ideal, because the connection between what happens in our economy and access is so intertwined. And certainly coming out of this pandemic, we know, and is broad topic for our NASIO conversations here, the way we work simply isn't going to be the same in the future. And the geographic boundaries that may have existed previously don't exist anymore. We have companies in California recruiting technologists in Minnesota. Our workforce isn't going back to the office every day. Your ability to live in different places and work in different places has never been more profound. And if you have access, you can participate, in this, larger economy and the economic opportunities. And so connecting the economic opportunities, both for companies, for individuals in rural areas, with the job development of the future. When you think about connected and automated vehicles and the various new jobs that are going to come about, at the core of all of these things is connectivity. We have so many special interest partnerships that are really, really important to connect with. The Governor Walz in June of 2020 created a partnership for Connected Minnesota, really geared at children and families related to connectivity needs, a public-private partnership with Comcast and Best Buy and the Blandon Foundation and other philanthropic nonprofit organizations. Our task force on broadband, also a public sector, private sector collaboration. And I think those partnerships are really crucial to continuing to provide access as it relates, to the speed. Even what we view as adequate speeds today, when you see multiple families that have video conferencing needs, kids that are online, telemedicine, so even when we talk about the 100 megabits, that may not be sufficient. Going forward in Minnesota, we're fortunate to some degree in that 88% of our households in Minnesota do have access to 100 megabit broadband connectivity, but that means that 12% don't. And that's a lot of people that are on the outside looking in on a lot of critical economic, educational, healthcare opportunities.
Absolutely, and those partnerships are so key. The partnerships between state agencies, state local governments, state and the private sector are just so critical. Tony, I know that you've been focusing on developing those partnerships with industry, with locals, with your legislature there in Colorado. Maybe can you touch a little bit on how that's playing into your overall strategy and how you're working those relationships and leveraging those partnerships going forward?
Sure. When we first created the broadband office, it was created by the executive order. And we didn't have a real formal structure for the relationships and partnerships within our office and the state agencies. And so in 2019, just prior to the pandemic hitting, we published a report to the governor about how we should restructure ourselves to really pull things more closely together. Because even though we've been making some really good progress, primarily focusing on rural access, this physical infrastructure to get people connected in rural communities, we felt we could do better. And so we created a broadband advisory board that's made up of executive directors of a variety of state agencies. It's a public board. We have an opportunity to bring in industry, local citizens, folks at the county level, county commissioners, city managers, and so forth, to have a dialogue and a conversation about how we're going to go solve this problem together. Because it's a classic, it takes a village. I don't think the state by itself is going to solve the problem. It's great that the federal government is now providing more funds, but if you don't have the engagement at the local level, it's incredibly challenging to really get solutions into those communities. And so I think one of the things that we've done a very good job on as part of our grant programs is giving money to regional councils of governments, to counties, and or to municipalities to help them develop their broadband plan. Because we think of it as there's not a single state plan. There's a plan based on your community needs and sort of what infrastructure you already have in place. And I think that's been a great catalyst for us going forward. And I think because we've done a really good job of partnering both with industry and with local communities, I think it's created a tremendous amount of momentum. Obviously, add in the challenge of the pandemic, and now everyone realizing, oh my God, if I'm not connected, I can't really participate in this economy. I think that was already there, but I think we were kind of ignoring it because we still had the ability for people to transact, in a physical world, and the pandemic sort of cut all of that off. So one of the things I'm very encouraged about is that there's actually legislation that will come out of the Assembly this year that is codifying both the office and providing incremental stimulus funds at the state level. So not even dealing with federal dollars yet. The state is putting more money into it. Over the last 5 years, we've spent, close to $106 million, both on middle and last mile kinds of grants. The legislation that's coming through right now is going to give us another 75 million, and it's distributed between continuing to build infrastructure, but we're also pivoting towards things like we've already talked about in terms of digital literacy, making sure that you solve some of the other issues that are associated with being connected. You know, if you have a pipe into your house, but your house only has one laptop and you have 5 people trying to use it, that may be a very fundamental issue in terms of your ability to you know, do online learning, or, you know, have access to be able to work online and those kinds of things. And of course, we all are dealing with the broader issue of just overall affordability, you know, of broadband. So we're starting to pivot in that area. And I think that's because we've had this constant discussion that we've all got to partner together to really go solve this problem. We can't, you know, it can't just be the state, it can't just be industry, it can't just be the federal government. You know, it has to be everybody coming to the table and talking about how we're going to solve the problem in this specific community. And so I'm pretty excited about the direction that we're headed on this.
Yeah, you know, that leads right into a question that just came through on the chat related to your state's research and education network. You know, and there's a lot of federal stimulus as well coming down through anchor institutions to schools and libraries, efforts to help with devices. You know, how does that strategy play in there? You know, Tony, you mentioned the grant program, which I believe you mentioned anchor institutions in there as well. Maybe
we partner with the Department of Education and also working with the higher education community as well, because as many of you know, they have this network that they all participate in as well. And so we look for opportunities where we can leverage that infrastructure as part of a solution, so that they're another piece of the puzzle, is the way I would describe it. And then separately, you know, we looked at anchor institutions as kind of a critical piece for a community. So if we can't get everybody physically connected, let's make sure the hospital, the school, the municipal building, the police station in that community has access to high quality broadband. And we've been very successful with that in terms of driving fiber into those communities to really address that issue. And what that's done is allow the private sector to take a look at that, because we say any money that the state spends on fiber to build to a hospital has to be open access. So it can be available to others, you know, for other types of services. And so that's been a catalyst for many of our smaller service providers, because we're served by over 100 in the state of Colorado. I know everyone thinks about the big guys, but there's a lot of small companies that provide broadband service in the state. And what they're doing is they're leveraging that along with grant dollars from us to go build last mile solutions. So our education system, you know, the K through 12 is very important to us. And then trying to work with the higher ed side, primarily, you know, looking at opportunities where, you know, there's access, you know, to high quality fiber that will allow us to drive it into the community.
Absolutely. That's really great. Scott, kind of along the same lines, you know, I know that you had talked about a lot of the you know, state level work between agencies and with the Broadband Council. How are they playing into some of the local government solutions and local plans? And I can't imagine how many ISPs you have, large and small, there in California. How are those relationships layered and leveraged on top of each other?
Well, you know, I think collaboration is central to everything we're doing around broadband in California. And as I mentioned, the Broadband Council is like a great starting point. And the broadband action that we developed created some additional structure in terms of broadband for Californians. And where we align is on the long-term goals that all Californians have high performance broadband at home, schools, libraries, and businesses, that all Californians have access to affordable broadband and devices necessary to access the internet, and that all Californians can access training and support to enable digital inclusion. So, from that standpoint, that's the structure. The plan has individual items that, as I mentioned before, focus on mapping and data, which is going to be essential to assessing need and deploying resources, adoption, and some other areas. I would go back to where I mentioned the governors may revise, and the $7 billion funding allocated over the next 3 years. A critical component of that, a significant portion, is to build out middle mile network that the previous participants have mentioned. And so to look at the areas that are currently un or underserved and deploying that middle mile open access fiber to support deployment of either existing providers or other entities, be they local governments or co-ops, to provide and provision services there. Another piece of the funding in the May revise is $500 million in loan loss revenue to assist local governments, tribes, and nonprofits to secure private financing for networks, and then one-time federal funds that are housed within the Advanced Services Fund to incentivize existing and new providers to fund those last mile pieces in underserved areas. So like looking at that roadmap, the collaboration with local entities and other partners is ongoing. I mean, we're working with the Governor's Office of Business Development to do community needs assessment to really map out a community broadband assessment where individual entities, be they cities, counties, consortia, special districts, where are they in the process of identifying and mapping their broadband needs, and then using that to determine where the resources that the governor envisions allocating through the May revision can be deployed, but then also looking at future opportunities to match make additional funds that are available through federal, state, and private foundation funding.
Absolutely. And we're getting I see some echoes and applause in the chat here for state investment in those middle mile open access networks, which I think have been really important. And we're seeing more and more states endeavoring to achieve that. Tony, what was the experience there in Colorado with building out that middle mile network with open access? That others might share from your experience there?
I would say probably the biggest piece that made that program successful, and it's ongoing, is we set it up as a separate program targeted specifically for that, and it's public money, but the issue is that the local community, whether it's a county, if it's a regional council of government, which is typically multiple counties, coming together, it's a 50-50 split. We'll give you 50% of the money that you need. You put up 50%. We'll work with you on the plan and the strategy and all the things. We'll help you figure out who you're going to partner with to do that construction, all of those things. And even, determine how you want to manage that network once it's all built. Do you want to manage it internally? Do you want to, have a provider work with you, provide those services? And that has made it very successful because it's owned by the community that's trying to deploy it, and they really understand what they want to do. Because again, for me, it just doesn't work if we try to come in and say, well, we're going to build this for you, and here's what it's going to look like. So you have to have that collaboration at the local level, and one or two champions at the local level. They don't need to be technology experts, but they have to have a passion about wanting to solve this problem at a local level. And that's been incredibly successful for us. And then what it does, as I mentioned earlier, then it drives the cost down for a service provider to think about, okay, now I've got fiber into the community. I can start thinking about how I want to deploy last mile services as a commercial offering to individual homes and so forth. And when we started that program, a lot of what we were doing, this was about 3 years ago, we were seeing a lot of microwave. Now I would tell you that, 95% of the grant applications that we get are fiber to the home grant applications for last mile. And the last piece that I would mention that we've been working really hard on is with our rural electrics. And we've tried to get them to be more engaged in being a partner and thinking about offering these types of services. And we've gone from 2 rural electrics being engaged in this market to, I would say, 6 or 7 of the 26 that provide electric service in the state are now either providing broadband services or contemplating providing broadband services. Typically, they set it up as a separate business. But the reason we do that is because if you think about it, they have a lot of the infrastructure already placed for that last mile. So, we're trying, again, I keep thinking about this as this massive puzzle that I've thrown on top of my desk, and how can I pick all these little pieces together to solve the problem community by community by community.
Yeah, and that sounds like it's really also empowering for the local communities as well, because rather than, maybe the state coming in and building out an entire network, you're empowering the local jurisdictions to build out their own with the expertise of the state. Curious, Tarek, if you've had a similar experience with that on the infrastructure build out and access in Minnesota.
Absolutely, Tom. And one of the things that I would absolutely echo is, and again, kind of highlighted during this pandemic, at times it was heartbreaking during, the most crucial parts where businesses were shut down, kids were home, and, many families simply didn't have access, to know that there was, access in many different places, whether it's private sector business that provide public Wi-Fi opportunities, or there are public locations that have public Wi-Fi available, and there really wasn't a way to tap into those resources in an effective means. And I think that puzzle doesn't include just one prescriptive formula. I think it's leveraging everything from building out these last mile opportunities to making sure that we, use a little bit the gig model of, aggregating the types of resources that are available within a community and making those, broadly available, to continually looking forward towards new constructs that are developing and evolving. Certainly lots of success with technologies like Starlink in rural areas that, bring different types of opportunities. And I think, that puzzle doesn't have just, one spoke to the wheel. I think there are many different aspects to it. And I think we have to collectively look at, all of those things as this continues to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got this question here in the chat, and Tony kind of touched on this, when he talked to the point of there being a number of different providers in Colorado. But how are you all thinking about strategically kind of finessing the development of access with those providers in maybe those rural areas by utilizing some of the new funding coming from the federal government? And we went through over the last few weeks here at NGA all of the different just individual funding pots that are available to states, to state adjacent entities, to local governments, to consumers, to ISPs, to everybody. And just trying to figure out how to layer all those funds on top of each other is part of that puzzle. And it's just, I guess it turns it into, one of those 3D puzzles and adds another layer of complexity. But, how are you all going about looking at those funds to build out your efforts? Anybody jump right in.
I'll start real quick. Yeah, you raise a very interesting point. Excuse me, about the federal side of this. You think about the FCC and the things they've been doing for a number of years, and U.S. Department of Agriculture has a bunch of grant programs that they are pushing money out. One of the things that we tried to do early on, what we found with a lot of our smaller providers, they don't know necessarily how to apply for federal money, or they don't have the resources necessarily to do it, because it's laborious. I mean, and if you don't get it right, you get kicked out of the grant cycle essentially, right? Because you haven't filled out all of the forms appropriately. So one of the things that we did is, we had one person who was we called her and she still is our federal expert. And so she is the person in our office that is like the go-to person for understanding how to navigate those programs. But the FCC ones sort of kind of take care of themselves because of the structure of how they work. And we've been fairly successful at that. And I had this motto or mantra that said, let's get our unfair share of federal money. Because if you don't apply, you don't have a shot at it at all. And what we were finding that a lot of our small providers weren't, and our rural electrics weren't doing. This year, for the first time, we're starting to see some of those opportunities, particularly the USDA programs where we're having some traction. And as we move forward, we're thinking about this federal stimulus. I'm sure we all are. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to navigate that, because I want to help make sure we make the best use of that money. And I think what we can do is be a really good advisor for those monies, but we haven't figured it all out yet. But you raise an excellent point. There's a lot of federal dollars floating around, and you got to figure out how you can capture money for your state, typically through whoever going to make the application.
Absolutely. I used to work in municipal government a while back, and I knew a guy in rural Maryland his name was Happy, and he was the local grant manager, and he would just always be preaching the necessity of getting some a good federal grant person, because there are so many opportunities out there. And I'm recognizing here that we are that half hour, 35 minutes just flew right by. And I guess in wrap up, what's maybe the single best action or resource that you've developed, maybe action, resource, or partnership in your office that has really led to some transformative results when it comes to expanding broadband access, infrastructure, and affordability? We'll go around. I guess we'll start with Derek.
So I think, for us, that's a tough question. You got to think back, like, hey, what's the singular? I think, certainly our border-to-border grant program that has supported, I think over $120 million worth of broadband development in Minnesota, and has allowed, for that continued proliferation, along with the governor's task force on broadband. And that task force is a wonderful collaboration with contributions from businesses, local governments, educational institutions, healthcare facilities, our tribal nations, ISPs, and it's only through having a task force that has that holistic view can you really develop the strategies of how should we approach some of the funding opportunities that you referenced, and what fits best for Minnesota communities. So I think the combination really of the border-to-border grant program in conjunction with these really significant collaborations and partnerships that we have that are really the most significant.
Great. Scott?
Well, it's hard to say just one thing. So I'll say one thing with a couple sub bullets under that, but particularly given, California had made great progress and, on broadband deployment. And as we've all discussed, COVID really changed the game and highlighted additional needs when you're looking at remote work, remote education. But I'd say the development of the California Broadband Council and having that formal structure to bring independent agencies together to collaborate, to share information, to work together and really, feather in the values and objectives of getting broadband access, affordable broadband service, devices, and digital literacy training. I think that's critically important, and that it was having that body together that really allowed us to support the development of the governor's broadband executive order during COVID, to provide meaningful feedback about like what needed to be in that, and then what actions would we be taking afterward. It led to the development of our broadband action plan, which is really a great roadmap to really, identifying, what needed to be done in what areas, and then set us up for, being able to utilize the funding that the governor has outlined in the May revision, the $7 billion of funding, catalytic investment to make some transformational change in the broadband ecosystem here in California.
Absolutely. And, from where I sit at NGA, establishing those structures, getting the right team in place in the right room to really set, like you said, set you up for success is absolutely critical. Definitely couldn't agree more with you there. Tony, we're a minute or two over, but
I'm from New York, so I'll do this in a New York minute. Yeah, it's really hard to like have a single thing. I agree. But if I had my top three, starting with number 3, I would say access to capital is like number 1 critical, because that's the issue why you don't have, access in rural communities, because it's expensive to build it out there. So the business model doesn't work. Our federal grant expertise, I think, has been really a catalyst for us. But I would say the number 1 thing for me has been the investment we made with local communities, whether at the county level or local municipal level, with a strategic plan. Let's figure out what your plan is first, because that plan drove the engagement. And I think that's been critical for our success so far. But there's a long way to go. We have a lot of work to do.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic discussion, and thank you to Dennis and to Emily and to the whole team at NASCIO. This has been really great.
I want to thank the panel. Tom, great job moderating, bringing the national perspective and pulling it all together. I think that it was great hearing you moderate that, and our panelists. Scott, thank you so much for standing in for Amy, and it was, it didn't seem like you've only been on the job a short time, and please send Amy our regards, and thank her for, linking you with us, and for Tony and Tarek, thank you again as well. Great job on the panel. At this time, we're going to transition into the virtual hallway group chat, so I encourage you all to join. And I hope to see you all at the next discussion that we have this afternoon. See you soon.